Hello everyone, welcome back to the Die Is Cast. Today we're doing Ripley's Minisode.
Uh,
Um, Ripley,
that's me.
after you set up camp last episode and you decided to lay down for a rest, your bird rest.
I don't think I'm far enough along the monk thing that I don't need sleep.
Yeah,
I
you're
don't think
not
I
yet,
am.
I think.
I think I still need to like sleep.
You're still sleep.
I'm
Yeah,
still a
you're
sleepy
still
bird. I'm still a
confined.
sleepy bird.
You're still a sleepy
Sleepy
bird.
bird.
You go to bed like for this. The past 2 days have been pretty hectic,
Uh huh.
so you need this
Hmm.
rest. And your mind wanders to your training right before you float. I'm trying to make a metaphor work, but it's not
Are you
working.
gonna
So
say
you just go to sleep,
okay? Are you gonna make like a fly joke?
like you're flying away to dreamland or
Mm-mm.
something. But
Nope.
I tried to make that
Nope.
work, but I messed it
Nope. Nope.
up.
Nope.
I goofed
You
it.
fucked it. It's fine.
You go back to your
Uh huh.
training. Um, you said your village was in the mountains,
Yeah.
right? Like some indiscriminate mountains we don't know the names of.
Um, they're mountains that aren't really have. I can tell you that they're not habitated. Nobody lives there
Okay,
except the Aarakocra village and the monk sort of thing.
okay,
Mostly because the monk thing is like in a part of the mountain that's accessible by people who have legs. But the Aarakocra village is very difficult to get to without wings and without knowing where it is.
true. So those mercenaries went through a lot of trouble to
Yeah,
get to your
yeah.
village.
Because Aarakocra aren't extremely. They're not like antisocial, but they usually stick to themselves for the most part, like to their own sort of species for the most
Yeah,
part. Like Ripley is a pretty big exception to the rule, and that's really just because of her situation.
pretty much. They stick to their flock
Right.
for and they just stay
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I would imagine they would do trading with the monk temple, which is how you probably knew
Mm-hmm.
about it.
Yeah, and there's probably a town I imagine, like at the base of the mountain or somewhere close to it, that they trade with every so often. Like they weren't like hermits up there, but nobody really went up to bother them.
Yeah, pretty much. After your village burned, Ripley, you made your way to the monk temple, which the way of the sun soul,
Right.
uh, a power that harnesses the sun itself, the Haman, to fight
Yeah.
the
Thank
undead.
you. Wow. You
It's
know
just
what?
the
No, I'm
Haman.
gonna be honest. Here. Like I didn't completely sort of like visualize it like that until very recently. Like I didn't really think that this is just kind of a big old JoJo thing because that's not what I went
This
for
is
when I.
just.
It's certainly not what I went for when I picked it.
But now you realize
I
it's
now
just
I realize it's
JoJo.
just JoJo, and I quit.
Oh, you've learned
Yeah,
the ripple.
yeah. It's essentially the ripple. It's all about life energy and shit like that.
You've heard of these monks before,
Hmm.
but it's just they're as secluded as you are,
Even
but
more so, I think. I would think.
yeah, like the way of the Sun Soul is a very rigorous
Hmm.
training. Like you're harnessing the power of the sun itself into martial
Right.
arts. So, you approach their temple, and after some convincing, you manage to make your way. You manage to convince them to let them start training you like for 1 month, and if you show progress,
Right.
they'll keep you.
The stipulations there were Ripley um, sort of came upon them. The whole situation with Ripley's home being raided and shit happened uh, basically when she was the equivalent of a teenager, like a about to leave her teenage years, sort of like on the cusp
For a
of being
teenager.
an adult in terms of Aarakocra terms, which is like 3 or 4 years old or some shit like that. Um,
Yeah.
and the stipulations, as I recall them, were I recall them when I wrote them, were something along the lines of shit. What was it? They agreed to train her with the stipulations that she not purposefully seek revenge, and that
Yes.
they offered her like a place to stay for as long as she needed it, but only allowed her to train with them under the stipulations that she progress at a good pace and that she not have sort of like vengeance in her heart, because that's not really their
Yeah.
sort of way of doing it.
Yes. That. What would you say is the species that practice here?
I think they're mostly humanoids, like elves, humans, probably a few dwarfs even.
Dwarves.
Yeah,
Okay.
um, dwarf monks I think are somewhat rare. I mean, any species can be a monk, but I think it was mostly humanoids, and especially that because there are some races that aren't as acclimatized to a mountainous condition as others,
That's
and
true.
certainly humans can acclimatize to anything. That's sort of their trait. Um, Elves are pretty long lived, so they don't care as much. And I imagine dwarves would do pretty decently in a mountain environment.
True. So yeah, you have a couple humans, some dwarves,
Mm-hmm.
some elves. And do we want to give out NPC
You
names, like
can,
just jam
you
them
can
out?
if you want. I haven't really made any of my own. I always sort of imagined these like these wise old monks, but I never really gave them much in terms of like genuine character. Just sort of a like an archetype sort of thing.
Okay. All right. Right now you're sitting in the dojo and you're cross-legged,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to learn how to meditate. And across from you is a teacher who you were assigned to, which is an elven
Mm-hmm.
man. And he looks up there. He looks roughly about 600 years
Right.
old. He's close to
Yeah,
death
he's
in
pretty up
about
there, I
100
bet.
years. His face is wrinkled and very
Do
sullen.
elves wrinkle?
And I would
I
imagine they got
I
old
guess.
enough.
I don't actually know.
Like he's 100 years away from
Right.
dying,
Right.
so
So he's in the prime years. Yeah.
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 His hair's white,
Right.
and he's humming to himself. And but I want you to make a dexterity check
Okay. Let me whip out my brand new physical dice that I bought.
from an amazement.
That's the wrong die. That's a. Hold on. I got a character sheet out. Oh, I gotta switch to my character sheet. Did you just plug animation?
Yes, I
Thank
did.
you. Animazement Die is Cast now sponsored by Animazement 2018. What the hell is my? You said Dex?
Yep.
That's a 20, but not a nat 20.
Okay. Um, you don't see it, but your instincts catch it. Like your teacher had just thrown a pebble at you, but you caught it like while you're
Right.
meditating.
That's some hot shit.
And he kind of pauses and like nods, like you're showing promise
Right.
actually,
That's some
like
pretty hot shit, actually.
you. And this happens across the span of a
Mm-hmm.
week. You come in, you sit, you meditate for like a few
He throws a
hours.
rocket
He
at me.
throws pebbles at you randomly to see if you're
Right.
keen, while also maintaining peace and
Right.
balance. You do it each time,
Mm-hmm.
and then you move on to your next to another week of training. You know that thing where And that thing where Shaolin monks punch sand to strengthen their fingers.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think. I would
So you're
be doing
doing
that.
that?
Yeah,
And what do you feel? Do you want to make a strength throw or a
I
constitution
would
throw?
prefer to make a Constitution throw because my strength is very bad.
Okay.
That's a 9. Yeah.
9. You actually
Yep.
sprain your
Yeah.
hand after doing a few. Yeah, it's rough, but you keep going, but it hurts
Hmm.
every time you do it. And they just tell you to stop because you're actually going to do some
Yeah.
real damage if you
The
keep
thing
that up.
about Ripley, especially at a young age, is that she's kind of like not like a hothead, but very obnoxiously determined to do things.
Yeah, I mean, you watched
Hmm.
your village burn down, so
She,
you're kind of
yeah,
fueled by
a
that right
younger
now.
Ripley isn't as sort of tempered by. Well, she certainly isn't tempered by the 7 years of training that it took um, for her to like meet to reach present day where we are like in the campaign. Um, but she's
Yeah.
also not sort of latched onto her ideals of justice and shit like that yet. So all she's kind of just motivated by her own desires,
Your third week of training, it's
right?
mostly just more meditation, but it's more in precarious positioning. So like
Right.
you're trained. They want you to train without relying on your wings when you're high up. So,
I think
well,
that would be
I'll let you determine what kind of role you want
that
to
would.
make for this.
Hold on. Wait for my character sheet to pop in. That would be, I would say, acrobatics probably. Do you think it'd be
Okay,
acrobatics or athletics?
make an acrobatics check.
Okay, that's over a 20.
Okay,
25.
that's good. That's more than
Yeah,
good
my
enough.
dex is pretty good. I'm also
You're
rolling with my current modifiers, but
yeah.
you
That's
know,
I did the same thing with Dev. It's all good.
right,
You're like balancing on your fingers and your
right.
toes.
I think Ripley's always sort of had a talent for dexterity, for like knowing her own body and like what she can do with it.
Yeah,
Certainly more so than strength, as
yeah.
we saw earlier.
She's
She's definitely not a strong bird.
she's always been like focused on not the strength of the blow, but like the momentum that it can create.
Yeah, the momentum and the placement of blows, and
Yes.
I think that's why I think that's part of why she wanted to train is that she knew that she had sort of a talent for like not brute force fighting, but more strategic sort of placement of her blows.
Yes. And you're entering the final fourth week of the month that you're training in,
Mm-hmm.
and you are finally allowed into the sanctuary of the temple.
Ooh.
High above you is a mural of a phoenix like blotting out the sun, and it's
Right.
gloriously red and orange and yellow. And you feel a sense of kinship for a brief moment.
Right.
Like, and for your final test, you're brought before the sensei of the entire temple,
Mm-hmm.
and what I want you to do. All you have to do is appeal to the sensei to allow you to train here.
Oh shit.
Like
Um.
your teachers up to this point will vouch for you because
Mhm.
you've passed 2 out of their 3 tests right now.
Right. Oh, give me a minute. It's harder to roleplay on my own when I can't think of when I can't bounce off someone else. So you gotta give me a second.
Funny enough, the sensei is an Aarakocran, but
Oh
he is
yeah, he's
not from your
not one of
village.
mine. I would
Yeah, he's
imagine.
not from your village.
Okay. So so Ripley walks up and she sort of bows. No, she definitely bows. She's a respectful bird, even when she's a hothead. Um, she pays her respect to the whoever to this guy, and she says, "Well, all right. I passed your month of training. I did everything I was told to do, and I did it all good. And except for the hand thing, I guess. But you did promise to train me if I did it, so here we are."
He pauses for a moment. Like, this is a okay plea. You're like, yeah, I did all your stuff. You promised.
Uh huh.
He is
As we
stand. Go ahead.
as we both know, Ripley's never been good with like words with her words.
Yeah.
Certainly not a smooth talker.
Even in the future.
Even in yeah, she's never really improved at it.
That's why she's evened out by Threy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he stands up. He looks more like more of a peacock than to what you are. You're more of a bird of prey. He's more
Right.
peacockish.
Right.
And he looks old. He looks about as old as what like a 30-year-old Aarakocra should look like.
I think that'd be a pretty close to how long did Eric Coker live again? 60, right?
About 30 to 40 years.
I think it.
I
Oh
think it
yeah,
was
so
30.
he's pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But but for some reason he emits an aura that you know he's far older than that,
Mm,
and he
right.
nods his head, and he just goes, "You show potential. You will train here. Is this agreed?"
Okay. Awesome. I'll do it. I'll do whatever you guys need me to do for as long as I need to do it before I master what it is you're teaching me.
We can teach you to touch your inner sun.
Son,
Your inner sun.
is that a metaphor?
In the future, Ripley just like she instantly realizes that wasn't a metaphor.
Yeah. In the future, as Ripley recalls, she just like bolts upright and is upset.
That wasn't a fucking metaphor. Okay, so you're accepted into the temple, and for the next 7 years you train there day and night. They teach you how to harness the element of fire and the light of the sun itself into your fists and your feet. And
Hmm.
through that training, you you come to terms with what happened with your village. You realize that it was fuel for your fire, which
Hmm.
that is actually a metaphor one of your teachers uses. Again,
That one's a metaphor.
that was a metaphor actually, but it was a fuel for your fire. But you also learn that the way of the sun soul is a path of like tranquility and like becoming one with the light.
Hmm.
So you needed to learn to let that go. Like
Right.
at what point do your train do you feel like you came to terms with that?
I think it takes Ripley maybe one, maybe 2, 3 years to really sort of let it go. It Ripley was always told herself that she wasn't letting it like influence her because she tried to be above it, but it was always sort of there in her mind, and it took a couple years of her to it took a couple years for her to really grasp the concept of like the tranquility of the art and sort of be at peace with it.
All
And
right.
as that happened, she started to shift her fuel more from revenge to sort of the early idea of her concept of justice, of preventing such things from happening to other people.
All right.
Her training started as sort of just an outlet, for her, but at about the 3 year mark, it became sort of a more of a path of life and a means to a new goal, which was to sort of become a protector for others.
That's a good way to develop. I'm proud
Hmm.
for her. Eventually, upon the last day of your seventh year, you are brought once more before your sensei.
Which year?
Your seventh year, your
Right, the
last
last
year.
year. Okay.
And this time he stands up and bows to you and goes, "You have trained what we have taught you all that we could, Ripley. You may stay here if you like, but you are now free to leave as you do choose."
Uh, Thank you, Sensei. As much as I think I'd like to stay here, I think that would be a waste of everything you taught me. And I think the only way that I know how to go forth from here is to go out in the world and do something with the last 7 years of my life.
There is a city-state near here, the opposite side of the valley. It's known as
Oh,
Shimmerdeep. Perhaps you may find your calling there.
I think I might. Uh, I don't think I can find it here, unfortunately.
Yes. May the sun guide you, Ripley.
Thank you.
And they give you supplies. You probably say goodbye to everyone that you grew close with here.
Hmm.
Is there any person you did grow close with?
Um, most of the there was nobody close to Ripley's age, um, either physically, certainly, because she's a 10-year-old bird
Yeah,
at this point, or like developmentally. At this point, she's like you said, she started as a teenager and left as essentially a young adult.
yeah, essentially.
Um, Most people training here, most people here were masters. There were no real other students besides her, since they're so remote, and certainly not many people know about or seek out the Sun Soul arts.
It's a very
Mostly because,
obscure way of the monk.
right,
Like, Way of the Open Palm is the most widely known. Way of
right,
the Sun Soul is one you seek out yourself.
yeah, and the location is certainly not easy to get to, and they're very picky about who they select.
Very true.
So I think at most the biggest connection she would have would be her teachers, her senseis. Certainly she trusts them with her life, but not so much as anything more than like a apprenticeship sort of relationship.
Yeah. Eventually, you say goodbye to all of them, the three who initially taught you, and all the other monks who trained you in other ways.
Hmm.
You gather supplies,
Right.
and you head off, flying toward Shimmerdeep, where you'll eventually. How do you feel like you came into bounty hunting?
Um,
Was Thray actually your first job?
no, Thray was like half a year, I think, into Ripley. The situation with Thravis was about half a year into Ripley's sort of year one. I
Okay.
guess actually we're still in her like year one in terms of being like out in the world. Um, she spent a couple weeks getting established, like finding a place to live, getting to know civilization as a concept because she certainly hasn't been in one in her whole life. Um, um, Certainly very. Ripley gets anxious about a lot of things, but she either hides it through her sort of personality quirks, her sarcasm, or her wit, or
Mm-hmm.
just hides it through her training. But she's certainly kind of anxious about like, I mean, imagine that you spent 10 years, your whole life out of society, and then just was thrust into like the epicenter of the world.
Very true.
But she sort of starts unofficially moonlighting as not as a bounty hunter, but as just she sees things happen and steps in, and eventually
Yeah.
figures out that that is a legitimate profession, applies for such a license, applies for such a permit or license or whatever you need to be a bounty hunter, um, to make money off it so she can live to some extent. Um, and I think I might have covered this in the first episode, but Ripley doesn't really see herself as a bounty hunter by trade. She does it for financial necessity and uses it as official connections to get access to certain things.
Hmm.
But she more likes to see herself as some sort of vigilante, someone who protects those who can't protect themselves or fights those who would do harm to others.
Yes.
Um, how she came into the thing with Thravis, was really just picking up word of mouth, just hearing about the cult for a couple months, and eventually deciding it was something that needed to be at least kind of scoped out to see if that was like something that needed to be taken care of. And that sort of situation got out of hand very fast.
Very
What
fast.
with the actual dragon in it, and that was certainly sort of a turning point for Ripley, both in that up to that point she had enjoyed pretty much a full field of success in her sort of forays out into the world. She had a decent relationship with the Shimmer Deep Guard. She had succeeded in every vigilante attempt she'd done so far, but the mission with the cult was the first in which she basically ran from the fight because she would have died otherwise.
Yes, fighting a dragon by
Right.
yourself is not recommended.
So it was a turning point for her because it didn't shatter her confidence, but it certainly made her reevaluate that maybe she was getting too full of herself as a fighter.
Hmm.
It also brought Thravis into her life, which
Pro-
provided sort of a balance to her person, and also the first person she would actually consider to be her friend. Not that she would ever say that out loud.
Then he just brought chaos into her life.
Yeah, because Ripley had no true companionship before then. Even with the monks, like I said, it was more of a student teacher sort of relationship.
Yeah,
Um, and Thravis is brought into her life, gave her a new perspective on sort of everything, really.
that's good. I like that. And eventually, as your dream comes to an end,
Mm-hmm.
you enter that mind space of where you're awake and you're asleep, but you've experienced through your meditation before.
Right.
And you see the image of your sensei. He
Hmm.
doesn't talk or say anything, he just looks at you for a few moments, and then the dream ends.
Hmm.
And here's what you get from that: you may now spend one limit break point to have your to activate your Phoenix ancestry.
Oh fuck, dude. And
But
wow,
once you've
okay,
used that, once you've done that, you cannot use it for 24 hours.
right. And that sort of came about from the memories.
Yes, the memories of like all that training, you're like, wow, they're actually training me to like learn about my.
Yeah, and I think you said Ripley's Aarakocra sensei
Yes,
was uh, Peacock.
yes,
It's possible and obvious that he knew about her ancestry.
yes.
If not, and I've gone back and forth of whether or not if Ripley didn't know about her ancestry because she simply wasn't told it prior to being sort of orphaned.
Like, did she ever notice that she was only like the reddish bird in the entire village, or
Well, I think it's not just her. I think it was her whole village was like that, but it was sort of a not like every single bird or every single Aarakocran had that much power. Certainly not as much as she does. Um, I wouldn't want to call it like a chosen one thing. It might even be a genetic sort of thing, but one in every so often could had the abilities as hers, like resurrection and affinity for fire and light magic, or not
Yeah.
magic. So basically, the soul arts essentially.
Yes.
She just happened to have a natural affinity, and as Ripley, certainly now at this point that Ripley come to realize this, she would be questioning if the reason she was taken in for training in the first place is because they noticed her potential in their arts and she was never told about it.
Yes. Otherwise, that is our episode for
Mm-hmm.
Ripley's backstory. We'll see you next time on the Die Is Cast.